Okay, here we go. It's always hard to get started with this. But the lighting is not all that great. It's a grayish day here on the prairie, waiting for rain. I've been up a couple of hours, but I'm not dressed yet, and my hair is wet. I just washed it in the kitchen sink. But it came to me kind of in the night that before anything else happens, I need to talk about this a little bit. I'm going to change screens so I'm not distracted. Uh, just kind of going. All right, I will look at the last page of my blog where there isn't too much, but it, okay, going on. Last night I was watching Dabu's Friday night kind of wrap up. Uh, they were Dabu and company friends were doing a live screening of the George Soros funded paid protests that shut down the city of Charlotte for the last couple of days, Charlotte, North Carolina. And at the time I was watching the live screen with Dabu and company, the paid protesters had moved into position in front of the Charlotte police headquarters. And at midnight, reinforcements came in. About another 1,000 people, Dabu estimated, protesters, paid protesters, and some others who weren't paid. But anyway, they all showed up at the same time, right about midnight, and took their positions. I didn't watch all this too much long after that, but for a while I was reading the comments coming in on the chat line. Dabu had this live stream up quite a while, several hours, and there'd been a lot of content brought forward in addition to the thing going on in Charlotte. And one of the topics that repeatedly came up in the chat line had to do with Aleppo. And there was one person there who didn't quite get it and asked, is Aleppo in North Carolina? And the chat went on, and this person came back in the chat and said, what is Aleppo? And I don't know, it triggered something in my head, and we need to talk a little bit more about Aleppo. The most significant event in the big picture today is that which is taking place in Aleppo, Syria. Almost no true news is getting through to the people of the United States concerning what the United States government is actually doing in Syria. Vaguely, people are being told that it has something to do with ISIS. But I need to talk about why, whatever the event going on in Syria, why is that the most important hotspot, current event at this hour? And of course, this information leads me back to something that went on. Maybe it's hard to keep track of time. I don't know if this was about 6 weeks ago or what. But Hagman and Hagman had a live phone connection with a field commander, boots on the ground in Syria. This field commander was an officer, a commander officer in the Syrian Christian army. That's a very important, underline that word, Christian army, Syrian Christian army, boots on the ground. He was a Syrian. He was a Christian. He was a commander in the Syrian Christian army. And first he talked about the event that was in progress at that moment. You could hear the gunfire and the explosions in the background. And he was giving a fairly detailed report. Now, there seems to be, if we revert to other information that is filtered through, a number of armies fielded on the ground. They are just called all kinds of different names. Syrian Free Army is one name. But the army that counts, the real army, is the Syrian Christian army. I'm making a point of that. So this commander, with boots on the ground, in the middle of that battlefield, doing a phone conversation with Hagman and Hagman, talked about, he began speaking about the painting, the very familiar painting called The Last Supper. And he said that we people in the West have been misled through some of the symbology in that very beautiful, wonderful painting. He said culturally, that painting was incorrectly depicting what really happened, or at that scene of the Last Supper. And this goes back to the fact that in what we do know from the New Testament regarding the personal history of Jesus is that the last reference in the New Testament to the childhood of Jesus was a comment made about something that happened when Jesus was 12 years old. Then the narrative in the New Testament stops, it drops off, and does not resume until Jesus publicly assumes his ministry at the age of 33. So those years in the life of Jesus, between age 12 and age 33, have been considered as the lost years. Actually, we now know that Jesus was not lost. but he was somewhere else. He actually lived his adult life in Syria, possibly even at Aleppo. Not too sure, but definitely he lived his adult life, his normal, ordinary adult life in Syria as a Syrian. He had family there. His mother was there, his brothers. And I believe, you can question this if you want, but I believe that Jesus had a deeply intimate and personal love relationship with Mary Magdalene. He was very close friends with Mary Magdalene's sister, Martha, and their brother, Lazarus. And it appears that during those lost years, Jesus lived a very normal Syrian lifestyle. And therefore, the picture that is given to us in that very famous painting gives us symbology that looks very different than how things actually would have happened in a Syrian culture. The seating arrangement at that table would have been very, very different. The table would have been very, very different. And those were some of the, visual effects that the Syrian commander was pointing out to us. But beyond that, the point was that Jesus was a Syrian. For all intent and purposes, he was a Syrian. Now, we in the West have been misdirected to think that Jesus's homeland was Israel, and that Israel was the most important piece of real estate on the planet. Actually, it wasn't. One of the reasons that Syria was then and remains now the most important real estate on the planet is because that's where Jesus actually lived his adult life. There so getting back to that adult life, two of Jesus's brothers, James and Jude, were probably quite a bit younger than Jesus. Mary, their mother, was a young woman when she began her childbearing years, and she could have easily had 20 years or so between the birth of her firstborn and the birth of her lastborn. So some of those children, isn't stated exactly how many children there were, but we know at least that there were 4. And James and Jude were probably quite a bit, they were quite a bit younger than their older brother Jesus. And children growing up really look up to their older siblings. So it was easier for those brothers to have faith. But one of the brothers was same age, maybe possibly even a twin. but very close in age anyway to Jesus. And for, for people who have grown up with siblings, brothers and sisters, same age siblings, there's a different relationship. You don't quite look up to that sibling, your same age sibling, with quite the aura of respect, possibly, that the younger siblings. So faith did not come that easily to this same age sibling of Jesus. And, you know, I can just really easily hear this older sibling, same age sibling, saying, oh, oh yeah, what? Go on. uh, you're no such thing, you know. So faith came harder for Thomas. And the only reference in the New Testament to this Thomas is the famous doubting Thomas. And doubting Thomas just said, oh, you know what? Prove it. Because, you know. So that was Jesus's same age sibling. And after Jesus had ascended to his Father in heaven, and the disciples all went out on their missions, Thomas returned to their homeland, and Thomas went back to Syria. And Thomas then founded the Christian church in Syria. And so it is believed by the Syrian Christians of today that their culture and their nearness to early Christianity is that which is most intact, and they are probably correct. Another thing along this line that I want to point out is that the book of Revelation is not actually the revelation of St. John. Revelation 1:1, chapter 1, verse 1, says, these are the revelations of Jesus the Christ, as given to John. And so in the book of Revelation, there are instructions to that John was to impart to the seven churches. And one of those seven churches was the church in Syria. The church in Syria is mentioned multiple times in the book of Revelation. Syria was important then, and Syria is important now. The documents concerning the Gospel of Thomas were rediscovered in 1945, and of course those documents, all those documents, were obscured and obliterated from public knowledge in 1945 by the fog of war, World War II, was in progress at that time. Uh, and just so you know, this research is not my own research. It is the research of many others and has been provided to me through the personal research of the purple puppy, that wonderful purple puppy in Texas. And this research is valid and it is true. I cannot copy paste any links to support any of the stuff I am saying at this time, although most of the links can be found somewhere on my blog. All right, so getting back to Syria. Sidestepping a moment to the Masonic symbolism, which always shows the black and the white, the checkerboard floor, the black and the white, the yin and the yang. This does not represent the good versus the evil, the holy versus the profane. That black and white checkerboard floor represents the two hands of the people who worship the unholy God. There are multiple names for the unholy God who is widely worshipped at the present time and has always been worshipped by some segment of the poor deluded human population. The Satanists are represented by the black squares in the checkerboard. And the Luciferians are represented by the white squares in the Masonic checkerboard. Somewhere along the line, those two groups are united at the top of the pyramid. And there are many additional layers and levels of this blackness and whiteness. Impregnating the top levels, as you know, of every organization that is on the flat earth today. Oh my God, these ideas are so large that they are very difficult for me to articulate. And I struggle to put the words together that and so we understand that at a spiritual level, in the unseen dimension, that there is a spiritual war going on between the profane God, whatever name wants to be attached, to that spiritual being, many people know that spiritual being by the name of Allah, apparently. And the Creator God, who is the loving Father of all of humanity, and certainly our Father, we the people of Christ. We are aware of that spiritual battle taking place in that unseen dimension. And there is you know the phrase, on earth as it is in heaven. So there is a visible mirror image, upside down, sort of, in the physical dimension. And the center of the battle in the physical dimension on this planet is not the real estate of the state of Israel, but is Syria, because that's where the truest surviving Christians are. That's what is going on in Aleppo. So that's what we're actually seeing there. This is not the first time that battle has been enacted at that site, at that location. There is a long history, which I am not qualified to go into at this moment. Similarly, however, I want to connect in here that the second most volatile location on the planet today is actually Poland, related to the fact that NATO, the armament of NATO, has encircled Poland. And the Polish people, many of them, know it. I reflect upon the fact that, again, I lose track of time, but some weeks ago, we know that the Pope traveled extensively in Poland, associated with the United Nations World Youth Day. At that time, I had many people from Poland viewing my blog. They were those people from Poland were not somebody who they didn't get to my blog because I'd been on some conspiracy forum and they followed that or whatever. No, what they did, how those Polish people, which was quite a large number actually, who came into my blog at that time, were actively searching for. They had put it in a search, and they were searching for alternate information about the visit of the Pope in Poland. And that's how they came to my blog. And I'm saying that because, my online activities have been threatened and curtailed, and this happened and that happened. And right now, I cannot even copy and paste. My spell check thing doesn't work. Oh my God, on and on. And I have really been handicapped about, and this has been going on, this assault, and it is an assault on some demonic level, if not also from the physical realm. Uh, really struggling to continue Max's thread. And why the hell should this matter so much, whether I do it or not? The viewership is very small, so on and so forth. But I'll tell you how come it matters. It's because uh, if you ever, there's a way off track here, but uh, there are actually in the Bible 42 different references, mentions of something called the former and the latter rain. Rain, R-A-I-N, ordinary rain. There's 42 references to that. 42 times that phrase is used. I have never heard anyone else expound about it, but there has to be a reason, something really significant about the former and the latter rain. The former rain could easily be construed to mean the deluge of Noah's day. But what then is the latter rain? Did you ever watch the rain? Of course you have. Think of watching the rain through a window pane. There is a drop. There is another drop. The drops become a trickle, little trickle down the window pane. Eventually, the trickle flows into the gutter. At the bottom of the house gutter, the trickles have joined together and become a little outpouring. And eventually that little outpouring pours on and ends up in a stream. And eventually the stream goes to the river. So a tiny drop of truth can go a long, long, long way. And when I look at my little blog, I know that somewhere on the other end, that little drop of truth that we, my colleagues and I, because I'm not doing this by myself, I have a support team. I have colleagues in whose input is more valuable than I could ever express. And these colleagues are all across the planet, in Texas and in Canada, in New Zealand, in Great Britain, in Australia, everywhere. So this is not being done by me alone, not by a damn sight. The energies merge. Okay, so the ocean cannot be complete without the drops that we are, is another way to look at that. But anyway, there is no doubt in my mind, but where somewhere on the other end, through that these little drops of truth are that fall into my blog, somewhere become a trickle on the other end. We don't know who all copies and pastes and puts this information into their newsletters and talks about it with their friends. And let's see, we don't know where all that goes. But there is a latter day deluge that seems to me to be in progress even as we speak. The former and the latter rain. And that latter rain is not the physical deluge as in Noah's day, but the spiritual deluge of the truth that is being poured out upon the whole earth. We see through the glass darkly. We can barely catch a glimmer of it. But this is kind of a paraphrase from Conan Doyle, that Sherlock Holmes statement thing. I was thinking about this in another context the night before last during the hard hours when I can't sleep, and at that time my thoughts were related to something else, but it doesn't matter because the truth is the truth, and these principles remain consistent. If all hard evidence is conclusive that a thing is not a lie, then what remains must be true. All right then, so there was another point in history, and again, I'm not qualified at the moment, although this information has been posted somewhere on my blog before, that had to do with a siege of the city of Vienna against the Christians. The siege was against the Christians of the city of Vienna, and the brutal encamped army on their doorstep was the Islamic hordes. This was I'm sorry, I'm not good with dates. Anyway, the siege of Vienna, the information, you can readily find the historical details. And a call was put out to all of Christendom by the people of Vienna, the Christians of Vienna. And the King of Poland rose to that occasion, and he stood up. And 20,000 Polish Christians stood up with him. And they marched. And they marched. And they crossed many lands. And that great Christian army met the foe at Vienna and broke the siege and saved the Christian stronghold. of that country beat back the Islamic hordes. The Islamic hordes fell into disarray, and the great crusades of medieval years receded into the rearview mirror of history. But you know that that enemy of God is an old being and has a long memory. And it is remembered what the Christians of Poland did. And so there is a vendetta against the Christian the Polish Christians, which is the most Christian, most heavily populated Christian country, nation in Europe at the present time. And that's why NATO has surrounded Poland for a takeout. I am not saying that the other hotspots in the big picture are not also valid threats on some level. The information concerning South Korea and North Korea is important and is ominous. I don't know. There is also, it came up yesterday, similar information about Pakistan preparing to do a first strike on a nuclear level against locations in India. And you know, the very worst case scenario, should Satan / Lucifer / whatever you want to call him, Allah, win this battle, which he cannot and won't, but worst case scenario that the world could possibly face is an Islamic caliphate which has in its possession nuclear capability. And so that's what the nukes at Incirlik, which were hopefully all moved to Romania, have to do with all of this. Because there very much is this, that is the end game goal of the Muslim Brotherhood in the White House, the Erdogan thing. All of those pieces fit together into their end time goal, which would be that the Ottoman Empire rises fully. An Islamic caliphate. And so now we're going to be distracted, and we have to be distracted because we also have to know about all kinds of other events. Yeah, Trump, Hillary, the presidential election, on and on and on. There's going to be a lot of stuff that we also have to witness. We have to bear witness. We have to, some of us have to be active. On some level, we all have to be active participants. Nobody can be neutral and sit on the fence. Choice has to be made here. You are either for or against. Choices must be made. And there are ways where we're all going to participate in these events, whether we want to be neutral or not. So, just saying, get ready. All right, I've lost track of time. I have no idea how long I have spoken or what I have even said. I always hope, oh my God, I hope this is coherent. But okay, anyway, that is enough of that for right now. And I will just end, as I always do, saying, I love you. I always have, and I always will. Later, Gator.